Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. When you're the only doctor in a rural mountain county, you've got to think ahead to keep your practice going.
So I have a new doctor coming August of 2026. I have a doctor coming 3 years from now, one maybe in 2 years, one for sure in 6 years, one maybe in 5 years.
And a West Virginia baker draws on her Finnish heritage to make a different kind of cinnamon roll.
I'm looking up recipes for cinnamon rolls and it's all calling for yeast bread. And I thought, I don't know how to make yeast bread, but I know how to make nisu. I wonder if I can make that into a cinnamon roll.
And if you bought a live cut Christmas tree this year, there's a good chance it came from Appalachia. You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by the COPD Foundation, offering educational materials and information on COPD symptoms, treatments, and diagnoses. Learn more at copdfoundation.org. Support for this program is brought to you by Solar Holler, helping Appalachian businesses and nonprofits manage energy costs through solar power. Information at solarholler.com. Support for this program is provided by the Thrasher Group, an architecture, engineering, and field services firm serving West Virginia clients and communities since 1983. More information at thethrashergroup.com.
Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. Rural Appalachian communities are experiencing a shrinking number of healthcare options. Since 2005, more than 24 rural hospitals have closed in the region. That doesn't include smaller clinics and other providers. This year alone, Augusta Medical Group announced it would close 3 Virginia facilities. That's after Congress passed the Big Beautiful Bill Act, which changed how healthcare providers are reimbursed for Medicaid patients. In November, an urgent care center in rural Patrick County, Virginia, closed too. In the wake of the closure, I went to Stewart, Virginia, to meet with the county's only doctor.
Mason?
Yes. Hey. Thank you so much, Dr. Cole. I was greeted at the door of Patrick County Family Practice by Dr. Richard Cole. Cole was born and raised here in Patrick County. He knew he wanted to be a doctor by age 5 and started practicing in the mid-'80s. In 1991, he founded this practice. 3.5 decades later, at age 70, he's still going. And he's as busy as ever.
My wife says over 100 hours a week. It's hard to ever be totally off. The task and the phone requests never stop.
Patrick County is a rural Appalachian county, home to a little more than 17,000 people. And at the moment, Cole is its only doctor. He's seen ups and downs over the years. Things got a lot harder after 2017, when the county hospital closed after its owner, Pioneer Health Services, went bankrupt. The closure came after years of financial troubles. In response, Cole started Patrick Urgent Care in 2020. The urgent care offered longer hours, an x-ray machine, and lab work. The COVID-19 pandemic hit just a few months after it opened, leading to a surge in patients.
During COVID, the urgent care was thriving. We were getting overrun. At one point, we had 90 patients coming in there at the same day, 2 providers.
Cole wasn't just providing medical services. He managed the finances at both the urgent care and the family practice. He partnered with an accountable care organization and moved to make the practice a rural health clinic to keep it in business. There was another problem facing rural healthcare providers that Cole couldn't overcome: the challenge of keeping staff.
In the end, we lost our nurses and we lost our providers who resigned, and we couldn't replace them fast enough. So we ran out of personnel was the reason we closed.
So in November, the urgent care announced it would close for good. The news came as a blow.
For rural communities and Patrick County, any kind of reduction of workforce and closure is difficult to swallow.
Rebecca Adcock is the executive director of the Patrick County Chamber of Commerce. She's seen the loss of healthcare infrastructure just since she moved to the area in 2008.
The hospital was opened. We had some other medical facilities available. couple more dentists than we do now. Patrick County Family Practice is the only medical facility doctor's office in Patrick County.
But the closure of the urgent care facility isn't the end of the story. Cole may be Patrick County's only doctor, and the family practice the only stationary doctor's office. But there's a free clinic for uninsured and underinsured patients, and a mobile facility that tries to meet people where they live. And there's still talk the hospital could reopen after being closed for 8 years now. After a previous company failed, Braden Health bought the hospital building in November 2024. It's working on the empty facility and trying to win regulatory approval to reopen it. On the day I met with Cole, I swung by the hospital. It's just across the street from the family practice. Braden Health CEO Larry Henson was on site, but he declined comment. Meanwhile, Dr. Cole is making moves of his own. Currently, Patrick County Family Practice has about 38,000 patients, more than twice the population of Patrick County. They travel from nearby counties in Virginia and North Carolina, largely out of loyalty to Cole and his staff. About half are Medicare or Medicaid recipients, and it's still unclear how pending changes from the Big Beautiful Bill Act could affect them. Since the urgent care closed, the family practice is offering expanded hours, and it's moving to hire additional nurses and other staff.
It's myself, I'm the only doctor in the county. We have 2 physician assistants and 5 nurse practitioners. We have 2 nurse practitioners hired that are waiting to get all their credentials. So I have a new doctor coming August of 2026. I have a doctor coming 3 years from now, one maybe in 2 years, one for sure in 6 years, one maybe in 5 years.
Once more of those providers arrive, Cole plans to reopen the facility that housed the urgent care facility as another rural clinic that will be called Stewart Family Practice. As he sees it, the future is bright.
I've never seen so much interest in young doctors wanting to come here and practice, and it opens up the door for me to finally retire.
But even at age 70, that still seems a ways off.
I'm hoping to gradually kind of slow down. I'm fine right now indefinitely, and I still enjoy practice.
So for now, just as he has for 40 years, Cole continues to serve the people of Patrick County and nearby communities. 10 months after floods ravaged southern West Virginia and eastern Kentucky, people are still rebuilding and wondering when the next flood will happen. Photojournalist Roger May knows the area well. He was born and raised in the Tug River Valley, on the border of the 2 states. West Virginia Public Broadcasting asked May to create a photo essay about the people of the area. WVPB News Director Eric Douglas sat down with May to talk about the project.
So let's talk about the Southern West Virginia project. You're a hometown boy. This was sending you back into your old stomping grounds. What was it like to go home?
Well, I think, any opportunity I get to go home to those counties in Southern West Virginia, it's great for me. It's reconnecting with my roots. It's helping me look at home in a different way, in a more nuanced and subtle way, hopefully, than we see from a lot of folks that are coming in to tell stories and that sort of thing. And I think one of the things that was on my mind was, how the passage of time really takes a toll on a place and people. So, in some regards, I feel like, I'm chasing memories of my childhood there. When I round a corner and I know what I'm going to see, sometimes it's like seeing it for the first time, or I go back to being, 8 years old and seeing that view for the first time.
It's not like this was the first time you'd ever been back to those areas. I mean, you were probably there the previous month, but yeah, I mean, this was an intentional project to look at how people are doing 9 months after a flood.
Yeah, exactly. And I do travel a lot. I spend a lot of time I live in Lincoln County from Mingo County, but I spend a lot of time in those 4 counties that I photograph. Maybe Wyoming not as much, but it reminded me of how much I do love Wyoming County, and to be able to get back there was a real treat, and to meet folks. I'm a bit of an introvert, and photography helps me, access people and places that maybe otherwise I wouldn't get out of my truck, and I'd be too oh, they're gonna think I'm up to something, or I want something from them, when in fact I really just want to hear their story, and share that story with the world. Working on this really helped me kind of negotiate with myself, like go talk to this person, see how the flood impacted them. How are they still dealing with this 9 months after the fact? A lot of folks are still very much in the thick of it.
I've heard that before, that having the camera, it gives you a little bit of a buffer between somebody, but makes them realize that, hey, you're not just some guy pulling up on the road. You look like a professional photographer.
I try to listen to folks and, be very clear about what I'm doing. And then even the language that I use, is, hey, I'm Roger, I'm a photographer. Can I make your picture for this project? And I'm intentional about the word make, because take just it feels like I'm taking something from them. So in my work and in my relationship with people, that's how I communicate that. Hey, could I make a picture of you for this? And then, of course, offering to share these images once they're published with folks really helps stay connected to folks and sort of close that loop of the story, right? They can see how their image is used to tell the story.
What did you see?
I saw small businesses that struggled to reopen. I saw folks that are still rebuilding their homes 9 months after the fact, building porches on the front of their homes. I saw a lot of resilience, which is a word that gets thrown around a lot. And on the one hand, I think folks get tired of having to be resilient. But when you're from our part of the country, that's just what you do, right? You rebuild, you regroup, you do the next thing, right? So I saw a lot of dignity and pride and humanity in folks that are still recovering from this.
In your essay, you got into the lack of usable land, that most of the land, especially in those counties, but Southern West Virginia generally, is owned by out-of-state conglomerates and that sort of thing. There's not safe places necessarily to live there.
Yeah, and that's not a new story. That's a well established fact in West Virginia as a whole, and particularly in Southern West Virginia, where you've got coal companies and land holding companies and things like that own. I think in McDowell County, it's maybe closer to 65%. Maybe over in Mingo, it's 53% or so. But yeah, I mean, folks, they can't go up higher on the hill if it's owned by somebody else who isn't willing to sell or lease the land. And so, what we hear sometimes from the outside is, why don't people just move? Why don't they just move to higher ground, or why don't they move farther away? And while I understand that question, it completely sidesteps the nuance and the complexity of what home is to people and where home is to people. And so it isn't just as easy as picking up and moving.
What's your takeaway from this?
What I got out of it was connecting to folks just on a conversational level. I think we're so divided in our country right now that people tend to think that, by default, we're in one of two camps. And, when you really just stop and talk to folks, when you find common ground and commonality, and, people are just trying to live, and they're trying to make it from one day to the next. So I relearned the power of just plain speak and conversation with folks, learning about their lives and how the flood impacted them, what they've been up to for the last 9 months, what they expect from, when the next flood is going to hit or the next natural disaster is going to hit. I think I just learned that everybody is worth listening to, and they have something to say, and I need to be listening to it.
Is there any special image for you?
I was in Wyoming County, and I was in the town of Matheny, which is just a little south, I think maybe southeast of Oceana. I pulled down this street, this road, turned around, and as I was coming back out, I was plugging in an address on my phone to try to navigate to maybe talk to some folks about their flood experience. And this older gentleman stepped out of his house and just struck up a conversation with me, asked me if I needed anything, and said, "No, I'm just, looking for this place." And told him what I was doing, and we talked for about 30 minutes. And his name was Ralph Hanna, and I never even got out of my truck to photograph him, which you can see my side mirror in the frame. And he just kind of leaned on the mirror, and there's this American flag in the background. 78-year-old man who had lived in this bottom his whole life, saw his childhood home destroyed by a flood years ago. And something about him, I don't know if he reminded me a little bit of my granddad or what, but he just had this wisdom that he was willing to share. And so I asked him if I could make some photographs of him while we were talking, and he said sure, and he just kept on. But that's probably one of my favorite ones. And then in Naugatuck, there was a guy who again, with his brother-in-law, was working on rebuilding his porch. He was holding one of his little dogs, came out. His name was Irvin Spalding, and so he's holding this dog, little boy. I made this photograph of him, and I didn't want to interrupt their work for too terribly long. But when I saw him over there working, it clicked that maybe this is rebuilding from the flood, and sure enough, it was. Even 9 months later, I think those two really stood out for me.
That was photojournalist Roger May speaking with Eric Douglas. The photo essay is on our website, wvpublic.org. On a winter morning, it's hard to resist a good cinnamon roll. But what about a Finnamon roll? Coming up, we'll have the story of a West Virginia treat with a European twist. You're Inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by the Charleston, West Virginia Convention and Visitors Bureau, featuring family-friendly activities such as Holly Jolly Brawley and Light the Night at Go-Mart Ballpark this holiday season. Details at charlestonwv.com.
There's nothing like the smell of freshly baked cinnamon rolls straight out of the oven. A baker in Charleston, West Virginia puts a twist on this traditional treat, and it borrows from her Finnish family bread recipe. Last winter, Folkways reporter Zach Harold brought us this.
Sometimes when I open my front door, I find a little aluminum pie plate there on the step. And without looking, I know exactly what's under the clear plastic lid. Several little cinnamon rolls, all drenched in icing. And this ain't the work of DoorDash or Uber Eats. It's a delivery from my down-the-street neighbor, Kim Kerr. She makes these cinnamon rolls, and a lot of other good stuff, to sell at farmers markets around Charleston, West Virginia through her small business, Whimsy and Willows. She brings my family the ugly, misshapen ones that she can't sell, though I can attest they taste just fine. After a couple years of these surprise deliveries, I finally asked Kim how she got into the cinnamon roll business. And the story, it turns out, involves some real detective work.
I started to, but then I didn't.
She invited me and my microphone over to hear the tale while she made a batch.
1.5 cups of whole milk. You got to get it to boiling. So about 3 minutes.
Just enough time to give you the backstory. This all started when Kim and her husband Patrick started Whimsy and Willows. It was a little rough going at first.
And so we started with jam and realized that everybody has jam. So I like baking. So I was like, well, I will get some of Sylvia's recipes because she had phenomenal recipes.
Sylvia is Kim's great aunt, and she was the family baker. Whether she came to visit Kim's parents or they saw her at family reunions in Massachusetts, Sylvia was always baking up a storm.
And so we would have to go to the store with Sylvie and buy packets of yeast and buy all of this stuff.
She made everything, from dinner rolls to gargantuan wedding cakes. But her specialty, and the family favorite, was nisu, a sweet, braided, cardamom-flavored bread native to Finland.
Finnish people are big on drinking coffee, so it's a coffee bread. So it was just always there.
Like nisu, Kim's family is originally from Finland. Her great-grandfather Mutti, Sylvia's father, immigrated from there in the early 20th century. The family tried to stay connected to those roots over the years and often attended Finnish heritage festivals down in Florida, where nisu was a regular feature. But none of it tasted quite as good as Sylvia's.
Hers is more ooey gooey, is the best way that we can describe it. So.
All right, the microwave's beeping, and that means the milk is ready. Now she adds a stick of butter into the measuring cup and allows it to melt. Kim wanted to bring Sylvia's nisu and its ooey gooey goodness to her farmer's market stand. There were just a few problems. For one, she'd never made nisu before, never made any kind of bread before. But more importantly, Sylvia wasn't around anymore to teach her how to make it. Kim did get in touch with one of Sylvia's nieces, the family's de facto historian, who was able to track down one of Sylvia's recipe cards. But it wasn't quite complete. The card listed the ingredients. It told Kim what temperature to set her oven to, but it contained no directions. Kim took what information she could glean from that card, filled in the gaps with nisu recipes she found online, and made her first attempt at her childhood favorite.
It wasn't a disaster, but it wasn't right.
It wasn't that ooey gooey texture she remembered, so she reached out to Larry, one of Sylvia's sons. He found another incomplete recipe. This one had the ingredients, but not the measurements for them, though it did have the steps.
She taught, enough people that I was able to put it kind of sort of together.
This new recipe fragment revealed a few of Sylvia's tricks. The first being, you got to get that milk to almost boiling and then melt the butter in it. And unlike some of the recipes you find online, you can't just add everything to the stand mixer at once.
I do about half the flour first, and then mix it, and then add in the yeast, and then do 2 more cups of flour and mix that, and then add in the butter mixture, the butter and milk.
The first batch of nisu she made following her dear Aunt Sylvia's order of operations turned out perfect, just as ooey and gooey as she remembered. And Sylvia's son Larry agreed.
He comes to visit us every now and then, every few years, and he will say, this is just like my mother's. Like, this is my mother's. So that, the first time he said that, I was like, all right, good, we nailed it.
It wasn't long after Kim had finally cracked the nisu code that inspiration struck for a new twist on the family favorite. This was 2020, and like all of us, Kim was stuck at home during COVID lockdowns. She got a hankering for some cinnamon rolls, but couldn't go anywhere to get them, so she decided to make her own.
And I thought, well, I'm looking up recipes for cinnamon rolls, and it's all calling for yeast bread. And I thought, I don't know how to make yeast bread, but I know how to make nisu, which has yeast, and it's a bread. I wonder if I can make that into a cinnamon roll.
Instead of forming the dough into long snakes and braiding it together, as she does for nisu, she just rolled it out into a flat square.
And then I paint it with melted butter.
Covered that square of dough with a cinnamon sugar mixture.
And then you roll it up.
She cut that rolled up log into medallions, put those medallions in pans to rise for about 45 minutes, and then put those pans in the oven.
Cook them for about 17 minutes. And then I spin them around and give them about 3 more and take them out.
It turns out that sweet, ooey gooey, cardamom flavored nisu dough made perfect cinnamon rolls. But there was one piece missing.
And while that's going, I'm going to go ahead and make the icing.
Kim originally thought about a cream cheese icing, But West Virginia cottage food laws forbid items that require refrigeration. So she went online and found a recipe for a shelf-stable alternative. It involves a whole bunch of sugar, a whole stick of melted butter, and
4 teaspoons of vanilla, but I kind of cheat and do more than 4.
that gets whipped together in the stand mixer and finally drizzled generously over piping hot cinnamon rolls.
Nobody has ever eaten a cinnamon roll and said that's too much icing.
She knows this based on some peculiar behavior witnessed from her farmers market customers.
We've seen otherwise prim and proper people who will lick the pan when they think nobody's looking, and it's nice to be like, oh, we saw that.
It wasn't long before the cinnamon rolls, which Kim's husband Patrick cleverly dubbed Finnamon rolls, became her most popular item.
I think my favorite compliment was the teenage boy who took a sample, and he was definitely a farm boy and had his boots and everything, and then turned around and came back and was like, these are the best cinnamon rolls I've ever had in my life, and bought some more.
She's now taken steps to make sure this new family favorite isn't lost to time, as great Aunt Sylvia's recipe almost was. Her 13-year-old son Jackson has recently showed an interest in baking, so she plans to put him to work on the Finnamon roll assembly line. But if anyone else in the family wants to give it a try, they might run into an issue.
I don't have like an actual recipe that I follow. I just mix it together and...
Have we learned nothing?
I need to write this down. Yeah, I should write it down. I will have to do that.
Reporting from 3 Doors Down, I'm Zach Harold for Inside Appalachia.
That story is part of our Folkways reporting project, which covers arts and culture in our region. You can find more Folkways stories about food deserts and football rivalries, draft horses and pierogies. They're at our website, wvpublic.org. In November, agents with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection descended on Charlotte, North Carolina, and surrounding communities. That led to a surge in immigration arrests. The Border Patrol's unexpected appearance in North Carolina, well over 1,000 miles from the southern border, has left people with a lot of questions. What rights do people have during encounters? What rights do agents have to access private property? And how can immigration officials conduct operations this far north of the border? Christy Gonke is the legal director of the ACLU of North Carolina. She spoke with WFAE reporter Nick Delacanal about the Border Patrol's operations in Charlotte.
Okay, so there is a lot to get into, and I want to bring up a video taken by a Charlotte resident, Reba Hamilton. She filmed agents approaching landscapers in her front yard on Saturday as they were hanging Christmas lights.
Good morning. Señor. Señor.
This seems to have raised two main concerns among people on my Instagram, anyway. One has to do with racial profiling, so let's address that first. Is it legal for Border Patrol agents to stop and question someone based solely on their appearance or their accent or the language they speak?
No. Unfortunately, a recent Supreme Court decision, one of these brief orders, has cast some concern that the Supreme Court in the future may overrule precedent. But what precedent says now is that you cannot stop people and for immigration enforcement purposes and detain them solely based on the color of their skin or the language that they're speaking, solely based on their racial or ethnic appearance. And so that is extremely concerning. We've been hearing reports of widespread racial profiling, and that certainly under the current law seems to me quite clearly illegal.
Okay, and then I think the other concern here involves private property. So in that video, agents walked onto a homeowner's yard.
Yes.
And then there was another case where agents entered the Myers Park Country Club without a warrant or permission and detained an employee who was later released because he had valid documents. What rights do agents have to access private property?
Yeah, that's a great question. And something I want to emphasize is that for the purposes of your Fourth Amendment rights, not to have your property searched, your home is really accorded extreme protection under the law. So for officers to just be entering your property without your permission and after being told to leave remaining, that is a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment and in state trespassing laws. And unfortunately, we're just seeing incredibly lawless tactics here.
Okay, well, let's talk about another case. On Saturday, agents were filmed breaking the car window of a Hispanic man, Willie Ace Tuno, after he said he did not consent to a search.
My wallet is here. Check my wallet. Hey, listen, I citizen. Hey, I citizen, man. Hey, tell the guys, I citizen. They just ID'd it.
This audio is from the Charlotte Observer, and this man was pulled out of his car, handcuffed, and detained before agents later released him with no charges. Just hearing these details, do you have concerns?
I do, because under the Fourth Amendment, law enforcement are not supposed to arrest people without probable cause or a warrant. It is completely unclear to me why they could have thought that they had probable cause to arrest Mr. Aceituno, and certainly not consenting to a search does not give them grounds to arrest him. This is really an ongoing concern about the deployment of federal officers into situations where they perhaps have not been properly educated on the Fourth Amendment rights of people going about their business. And unfortunately, we're seeing the effects of that.
Okay, well, let's talk about another case. This one involves a resident named Joshua Long. He was reportedly filming agents on Tuesday when they arrested him, saying he skimmed their car. Long says that agents didn't read him his rights, and his attorney says the FBI did not allow him to speak to his client while he was being questioned. So, do you see some areas of concern here?
Absolutely. First of all, if you're being arrested, you have the right under the Miranda precedent to be read your rights, your Miranda rights. They absolutely need to do that. They can't just arrest people and haul them off without advising them of their rights. Also, access to counsel is a critical cornerstone of our legal system. And it is extremely disturbing to hear that lawyers are not being allowed to see their clients, that clients are not being able to access counsel. That is, especially when they're facing criminal charges or potential criminal charges, that is absolutely illegal.
Okay, well, I have another question here that I think is like even more fundamental. So, a lot of people have pointed out that Charlotte is nowhere near the border or even the coast. How is it that Border Patrol can conduct immigration enforcement this far from the border?
Yeah, and there's a lot of confusion about this, and in particular this 100-mile rule that likes to be cited about where Border Patrol can operate and what they can do. I have very serious questions about whether Charlotte is within that 100-mile area where Border Patrol is allowed to engage in certain activities. But even if it were, it's incredibly important for people to know that 100-mile area or no, you still have rights. You still have constitutional rights. The Constitution applies, the Fourth Amendment, the First Amendment, all the other rights that protect you when you're having encounters with law enforcement or you're being potentially accused of a crime or they're seeking to deport you.
Okay, finally, North Carolina has this new law that bans face masks in public. And it says very clearly, no person shall wear a mask or hood on public property, quote, so as to conceal the identity of the wearer. Now, I believe the thinking among lawmakers was that this would be applied toward protesters. But again, a lot of people on social media are asking why this law also isn't being applied to Border Patrol agents. Do you have a read on that?
Yeah, well, my read of that law is that Border Patrol agents, law enforcement are not exempted from this law. I should mention that there is an exception, a safety and health exception, that people may wear surgical medical grade masks for the purposes of protecting themselves and others from the transmission of disease. So it's not that it's a complete ban on mask wearing, but it does limit the kinds of masks that people can wear. What we're seeing, however, is that these Border Patrol agents are masking to conceal their identity. They're not wearing surgical and medical grade masks in the pictures that I've seen. And it really is about just concealing their identity, which gives rise not only to a violation of state law, but frankly, transparency and accountability concerns for everyone. Unfortunately, I think this really shows that they know what they're doing is illegal. They know what they're doing is wrong, and they don't want to be held accountable for it. And that is absolutely antithetical to the way that law enforcement should work in a democracy.
That's Christy Gronke with the ACLU of North Carolina. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Ticks have become a year-round nuisance here in Appalachia. Even in winter, you can pick up ticks if you spend time outside. Over the last 2 decades, southwestern Virginia has become a hotspot for tick-borne disease. The area has the highest per capita rates of Lyme disease in the state. Katie Burke reports on why and what might be done to help.
At a public health fair in Roanoke, Jenny Hall holds up a plush version of a blood-sucking mite.
Have you ever seen this?
Hall is a public health expert at Radford University and founder of the website Ticks in Virginia. This event is put on by a nonprofit called Blue Ridge Literacy that teaches adults English.
Spider. No. Tick. T-I-C-K. Tick.
Okay.
Yes.
Tick.
A couple of advanced English students are visiting Hall's table, which is covered with displays and handouts in multiple languages. These students, Casimir and Wislet, have learned an important vocabulary word in Southwest Virginia. Tick-borne disease education is Hall's mission. In particular, residents from other countries often do not know basic tick prevention information or have the language to talk with their doctor.
So if they can go into the doctor with symptoms and say tick, there's going to be a better chance of getting a diagnosis.
The outcomes following a Lyme disease diagnosis are worse for racial and ethnic minorities. A Lyme rash is harder to see on a person with darker skin, and if a patient doesn't even know to ask a doctor about a tick bite, they will struggle to get the help they need. And there's more that Hall wants these students to know.
In Virginia, we have many ticks all year long. Summer, many more. But in the winter, this black-legged tick is common.
In the winter?
Yes. If it's not freezing,
they
can come out.
Like Casimir and Wislet, many residents are surprised by the number and seasonality of ticks these days. That's because the number of ticks is on the rise. Hall recently presented to an older audience in Salem that hadn't fully comprehended this rapid increase in tick-borne diseases.
They're like, we've had ticks here our whole lives. What's going on now that is different? Although people in the past may have had a lot of different tick bites and never had an issue, there was less of a chance to get a tick-borne disease.
Scientists do not fully understand why this increase has happened, but they've got some clues. The story is complex, starting centuries ago. Jory Brinkerhoff is a biologist at University of Richmond. He's been studying this change.
Deer populations shrank dramatically up until 100 years ago. As deer populations have come back, tick populations have followed.
Near one place that remnant deer herds had survived, Lyme disease was discovered, in Connecticut in 1975. Black-legged ticks and Lyme disease have been expanding ever since. Climate change is exacerbating that expansion because longer warm seasons are especially good for ticks. More ticks mean more tick-borne diseases. Brinkerhoff says,
Going back 20, 30 years ago, there were very few tick-borne disease cases in humans. Go into the early to mid-2000s, that's when things started to percolate, and it's just blown up since then.
Untangling all the factors at play is no easy task, but prevention is possible. Experts recommend wearing bug repellent, treating outdoor animals, and doing daily tick checks. Mowing and treating wild deer and mice with pesticides also help. But there's one option that has not received nearly enough attention, and that's where Elizabeth Gleim comes in. Gleim is a biologist at Hollins University near Roanoke. When she and 3 field techs were working in Georgia to study tick numbers on a forested site that had been regularly burned, they couldn't find any.
And after a month of field work, we had caught 1 tick across the entire 28,000-acre field site. And that is when I realized we had completely underestimated the power of fire.
Gleim had to broaden the study area to have enough ticks for comparison.
We found that, yes, if you're in an area that's burned on a long-term, regular basis, you're not going to have ticks. But also, if you are in an unburned area that is surrounded by burned area, you are also not going to have ticks.
Most of us aren't in a position to do regular controlled burning on the forests and fields around us, or treat all the animals in an area with tick pesticides. Although several Lyme disease vaccines are in clinical trials, they aren't out yet, and there aren't vaccines for the other tick-borne diseases. So for the time being, we prevent what we can. Tell everyone you know. In Roanoke, I'm Katie Burke.
That story was supported by the Pulitzer Center. It first aired on Radio IQ. A new study looks at how a chemical used to treat drinking water in Pittsburgh could impact urban streams there. For the Allegheny Front, here's Kara Holsapple.
The problem of lead in drinking water has been top of mind since the crisis in Flint, Michigan, which began in 2014. Exposure to lead impacts children's brains and nervous systems, and there's no safe level of lead in the blood. Since April 2019, Pittsburgh Water, then PWSA, began treating drinking water with orthophosphate to prevent corrosion of lead pipes.
So we have discovered that it is leaking into Pittsburgh's streams at alarming rate.
The study's first author is Anusha Balangoda, assistant teaching professor in geology and environmental science at the University of Pittsburgh. In collaboration with local water authorities, her team took samples from 5 streams in Pittsburgh before and after orthophosphate was added to the city's drinking water and found high levels of phosphorus.
Phosphorus increased over 600% after treatment began.
She says manganese spiked over 3,000%, copper over 300%, and iron over 400%. Those are corrosion byproducts. So how did they get there? According to the study, leaky water pipes. Balangoda says in 2019, Pittsburgh Water lost around 40 to 50% of treated water. That's about 25 to 35 million gallons of treated water daily. The agency couldn't confirm that figure, but said due to the age of the infrastructure and a historic lack of investment, its water distribution system does experience a high percentage of water loss. The leaking water takes the chemicals with it.
Phosphate can infiltrate into deep groundwater.
And she says phosphate can then move into streams. Orthophosphate can also get into streams through gray water, the treated water we cook and shower with, when the city's combined sewer system overflows into the 3 rivers and streams during rainstorms. What's the issue with increased levels of phosphorus in these streams? Balangoda says it's a nutrient, which feeds algae in streams, and that can cause something called eutrophication.
So that's leading into more algal blooms.
The study makes some suggestions for how to prevent phosphate from leaky water infrastructure. One is to replace old pipes more quickly. Another is to optimize orthophosphate in treated water.
Find the minimum phosphate level that prevents lead exposure without overwhelming local streams.
Pittsburgh Water says orthophosphate is a common solution to protecting water customers from lead pipes. By adding orthophosphate and replacing lead service lines, it says this October it reached a historic low lead level, 2 parts per billion, in the latest round of water testing. It says it has optimized the corrosion control program and that orthophosphate levels in drinking water are different from when the study was conducted in 2019 and 2020. But this isn't just an issue in Pittsburgh. Balangoda says lead in drinking water associated with aging water infrastructure is happening across the Northeast, Midwest, and Great Lakes area.
This is a widespread problem.
And that means water treated with orthophosphate could be leaking into waterways elsewhere, too. Balangoda says this study is the first of its kind.
We can have both safe drinking water and healthy streams.
But she says it will require investment.
That was Kara Holsapple. To learn more, visit the Allegheny Front. If you're shopping for a fresh-cut tree this year for the holidays, be sure to check the tag. Chances are it was grown in Appalachia. WUOT's Heather Haley went out in search of trees in East Tennessee and brings us this.
If you're shopping for a real Christmas tree, odds are it was grown in the mountains of North Carolina to Virginia and even parts of Tennessee.
North Carolina produces more Christmas trees than Canada.
That's Jamie Dinkins Bookwalter. Born and raised in the Knoxville area, she now works for the North Carolina Agriculture Extension, specializing in mountain conifers.
A lot of your Fraser fir Christmas trees that you go by at a grocery store are probably from an hour away.
And some are even closer. Fraser firs grow best above 3,000 feet, so they are harder to cultivate in East Tennessee. Hal Wilson found his family's property in Sevier County is special. The land ranges from 1,100 to 2,000 feet, But tucked between those hills is a pocket of colder air where Fraser firs are thriving.
When you leave Pigeon Forge and come here, it's always 5 to 10 degrees cooler here than it is there. We'll get 6 inches of snow, they'll get a dusting.
It all started when Wilson inherited more than 100 acres. He still shares the property with extended family, and together they all pitch in at the Wilson Glen Christmas Tree Farm.
You know, we took what came from our dad and mom, what they were able to do, and with the Lord blessing it, it turned into something much larger.
They began planting in 2009. Wilson says rainfall and cool soil temperatures are the keys to keeping the trees healthy through the decade it takes for them to be ready for the holidays.
Now this year, on the other hand, is incredible. Every couple of weeks we get another inch here. It's important that we're stewards of what we're left.
Wilson credits the farmers of North Carolina for sharing their knowledge with him, but he's also mindful of what they faced since the remnants of Hurricane Helene brought flooding and landslides last September.
$300 to $370 million of damage in Western North Carolina from Helene for just nursery growing. And a portion of that is folks that grew Christmas trees for seedlings. But folks were really able to restock. We're really excited, I think, to host people looking for trees in Western North Carolina.
Whether you're traveling or selecting a fresh-cut tree from a local store, check the tag to see what part of the Appalachians it was grown. Or choose one of the few East Tennessee Christmas tree farms to cut down your own.
Wear your boots and a jacket. We play our instruments and sing the old Christmas songs out of the hymnals.
Right now, Wilson's hills are alive with rows of trees in every size, all thriving in the chilly conditions, supporting that classic Christmas tree scent. I'm Heather Haley in Sevier County.
Since 1943, Santa Claus has spent one day a year delivering gifts to children across Appalachia. But instead of a sleigh, he travels by rail for this particular route. For the Appalachia Mid-South Newsroom, WUOT's Jackie Sieber climbed aboard the CSX Santa train to see the magic for herself.
Just after 6 a.m. on a cold, rainy Saturday morning, the Santa train rolls into Marrowbone, Kentucky in Pike County. Children and their families crowd the railroad track wearing pajamas and festive attire. They're here to see Santa Claus. Yes, the Santa Claus, as he tosses plush toys. This is the first of 13 stops the Santa train makes in Kentucky, Virginia, and Tennessee. It's part of an 83-year-old tradition to give back to historically low-income towns along the CSX rail line. Brian Tucker is the Vice President of Stakeholder Engagement and Sustainability at CSX. He says this year's event is particularly meaningful for communities along the rail line that were devastated by severe flooding.
These folks in these communities host us every day. They host the railroad. And so to be able to do something like this, to give back to them, is really important to us.
Tucker is among nearly 100 volunteers handing out over 15 tons of toys and thousands of backpacks to families during the journey. Santa says he's touched to see so many people pass around toys at each stop to make sure every kid has at least one to take home.
It hadn't always been that way over the years. I mean, there's always a few, but the extra sharing that's gone on today just has been really enlightening.
In Hayside, Virginia, Sophie Mosier and her brother get backpacks stuffed with goodies.
What's inside the backpacks that they're handing out?
I don't know. We haven't opened them. They're designed for different ages, so all kinds of things, toys,
Mine got
warm
a mirror
items.
and a cup and some stickers.
There's a drone in this one.
Sophie's family traveled over 5 hours from Ohio to be here.
I like coming to Santa Train with my family because I get to see my Aunt Lois, who lives down here. We don't see her very often.
Destiny Scott is with her family at the stop in Fremont, Virginia, to continue a long-standing tradition. Her son Noah receives a plush blue whale from Santa.
I've been coming since my mom and dad had me, so 27 years. And then my grandparents, they've been coming for 60-some years too.
As the weather clears, the crowds at each stop seem to get bigger and bigger. In Dayton, Virginia, kids sit on their parents' shoulders to grab Santa's attention. Sam Justice stands near the track with his wife and 7 children. It's their first time seeing the Santa train. Volunteers make sure their son Parker, who uses a wheelchair, receives a gift.
Some of the CSX workers came back and gave him a backpack. They got all these stuffed animals, so they were just wonderful and accommodating.
The day of handing out gifts also stirs up emotions for volunteers, like Gideon Jenkins. It's his first time riding the Santa train, and he says he hopes to do it again.
Even the toughest guy's probably going to get a little choked up today.
After an 8-hour journey through foggy valleys and mountains, the Santa train makes its final stop in Kingsport, Tennessee. Though it marks the end of this year's deliveries, Santa is already looking forward to next Christmas.
Merry Christmas all from the Santa train.
I'm Jackie Sieber.
Till next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. Our theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week was provided by Hello June, Frank George, Blue Dot Sessions, The Carpenter Ants, Mary Hott, and Matt Jackford. Bill Lynch is our producer. Abby Neff is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. We had help this week from Folkways editors Nicole Musgrave and Chris Julin. You can find us on Instagram @InAppalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/InsideAppalachia to subscribe to our newsletter and stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.